Names that have been confirmed for mobile manufacturing. Several names have come up for electronic manufacturing, but specifically for mobile and mobile component manufacturing. The minister has said that of the 5 global names that will be eligible for PLI benefits, Samsung, Foxconn, Rising Star, Pegatron and Wistron have been shortlisted, and as far as the domestic names are concerned, Lava, Dixon, Microsoft, Sojo and Optimus are the ones that have been confirmed. I did hear Paget Electronics as well, but I'll have my colleague Ashmit Kumar confirm once the release is officially out. But let's bring in our guests as well. We have telecom expert joining in, Sanjay Kapoor. We also have R. Chandrasekhar, former telecom secretary, joining in now, and also joining us from his home is Pankaj, Mohindroo, chairman of the Indian Cellular and Electronics Association. Sir, thank you so much for joining us this Saturday afternoon. Pankaj, let me come to you first. What do you first make of the global names? The minister specifically said Apple and Samsung is welcome to invest in India. What do you make of his comments there?
No, this is, this was in the making for the last 5 years. We've grown 1100% in mobile phone manufacturing in the last 5 years, from 18,900 to 2,15,000 crores. We've crossed the domestic market, saturated domestic market, and now we have to become global leaders. And in the global leaders, the two main players are Apple and Samsung. Apple is about 40% of the world value of mobile phones, and Samsung is another very big company in mobile phones. So necessarily to have a place in the sun, these two have to be the big names. Now the PLI is structured in this manner that the manufacturer gets the PLI very appropriately. So Pegatron, Honhai, Rising Star, Wistron, these are EMS companies who produce for other companies. What will happen with this is that there will be a huge value addition happening in India, because when we move from 2 lakh crores to 10 lakh, 12,000 crores, the scale will happen. And component manufacturing, so first sub-assembly manufacturing, which we are already doing 1 lakh crores plus, sub-assembly manufacturing and then component manufacturing. And alongside the PLI for components has also come. Now that is not, wholesome in its entirety, but this process which has got unleashed, we'll see tremendous development in the entire ecosystem happening in the next 2-3 years. The engines of growth are the CBU manufacturing for the global market. And second is the creation of the Indian champions concept. So what India aspires for now is that in the entry-level phone segment under $200, Indian companies should become global champions, national champions and global champions. And the demise of and the shrinkage of the Indian brands over the last 3-4 years, which has happened, will get reversed, and we have unleashed their animal spirits, and they will occupy the global space. So when we meet in say 2024 or 25, you will have Indian companies, as in motorcycles, in entry-level products under $200, you'll have substantial Indian companies having a share globally. So this is the basic construct and the logic of this policy.
Okay, Mr. Kapoor, let me come to you. As far as the minister's comments on Chinese companies is concerned, he said that I don't want to talk about any specific company. What I can say is that this is positive for India and that this is in line with government's policies on neighboring countries and security guidelines. What do you make of this? Unexpected lines?
Which includes China, and therefore no matter what, the people who want to come down to India and manufacture will have to comply to those conditions. And from that perspective, it's absolutely okay to have norms for these countries. But I think in my parlance, it's more important when you look at manufacturing programs to see how you are inching up the value chain, and that's very important. if a nation develops a nucleus for its manufacturing around the lowest kind activities of assembly, packaging, testing, then it may be okay to begin with, but eventually it has to grow very fast to a level where it gets down to serious components, because without those being in the nucleus, to attract stickiness amongst the entire ecosystem to come and manufacture and make you globally competitive doesn't happen. Any type of subsidy or PLIs can only help you to kickstart an engine. It cannot allow you to sustain the engine. The sustenance of the engine is purely on merits and global competitiveness, which can only come when the whole ecosystem begins to kick in. And I think India will need that eventually. Of course, there's no debate that India needs to strive towards Atmanirbharta, and there's no debate that electronics is a very important sector in our country because it now applies across industries and is globally one of the most relevant sectors. So there's no debate on that. I think the debate is to say, how will you make sure when these operators get incentivized, that they get incentivized for adding net value and not displacement of production from one operator to another because he gets subsidy and the others don't get subsidy, because that's a very natural tendency when subsidies begin to hit the market. The second is very clear that when you do it and you start earning money, then you start crowding out some others who don't get that money. And therefore, the competition is more because of the money value that you have versus others, but not necessarily because of the capability that you've built going forward. So I think I would look forward to India becoming really Atmanirbhar on getting up the value chain eventually, because that's where the real sturdiness, competitiveness lies. And the last point, that the security risk doesn't go away as long as the high value components don't get down to the country. That risk will remain, because the assembly and packaging doesn't take away the security risks. It's every important component that needs to come here for that security risk to go away for the nation.
No, absolutely. So just bringing Mr. Chandrasekhar on that point, and right after that I'm going to get my colleague Ashmit Kumar as well, who was at that press conference. Mr. Chandrasekhar, will this be a setback for us, the fact that Chinese companies have specifically not been included? Of course, no official comments coming in from the minister there. The domestic companies are Lava, Dixon, Microsoft, Paget, Sojo and Optimus. What do you make of these names? And I think, again, unexpected lines, but do you believe that the numbers that the minister said, 11,500 crore by way of investment, 3 lakh direct employment, 9 lakh indirect employment, is something that these companies will be able to offer in those 5 years?
Well, when you look at the value, I think we have to be very careful about how exactly that is, looked at. There's the question of what is the value of the finished product and what is the value addition that is taking place within the country. There's a well-known, example of Apple manufacturing in China, where out of a $200 product, barely $8 or $10 was the value added in China. So when you talk of the value of the product, that may not be actually telling you the entire story. The key question is how much of that value addition happens in India. The second question is how much of support by way of incentives is given for that amount of value addition. And the third is how much of duty or import protection is offered so that the domestic market becomes an added attraction for the manufacturing that is taking place. These are some of the questions I think which need to be looked at. But the point I think which Sanjay was mentioning just a little while ago also is that mobile manufacturing is important. The 3 lakh jobs direct and 9 lakh indirect jobs are definitely very good news for India. The names also are the best names in the world, Apple, Samsung and some of the Indian companies which hope to make it big. But at the end of the day, it still also represents a small fraction of the number of companies operating in India and could actually become a trigger for consolidation of that manufacturing within the country.
Okay.
The bigger question in the context of the security environment that we find ourselves in,
right,
and the backdrop for all these questions about China and manufacturing and so on, is how much does this manufacturing which is coming help to improve our security situation?
Yeah.
There you need to look at how much of this is, network equipment, core network equipment, how much of that is the technology which is being developed over here.
Sure.
Some of those strategic questions, I think, are still awaiting an answer. So I think we need to look at all of these different pieces while looking at some of the good news that the minister announced today.
I see Mr. Mohindroo's hand up, but I'm going to very quickly bring my colleague Ashmit Kumar into this. Ashmit, you had broken this story earlier. You were at that press conference. So let's break this up now. Mobile manufacturing, 5 global names, 5 Indian names, and there have been significantly more names included in the electronic manufacturing space. You have the press release as well. Let's break this up as to what the minister is expecting.
Well, in terms of the takeaways, very interesting that as far as PLI scheme is concerned, as many as 22 applications have been received. The big takeaway from that, of course, is twofold. Number one is that the likes of Samsung as well as Apple's second largest contract manufacturer, Pegatron, have also made an application under the PLI scheme before this scheme. Now, that's of course as far as global manufacturing is concerned. Amongst local players, we have the likes of Dixon, we have the likes of in terms of Lava, Carbon. So there has been significant interest domestically as well. Again, for the EMC scheme, there has been significant participation, as many as 40 applications received. What is conspicuous by its absence, of course, as you pointed out, is that Chinese companies are not party to this scheme. So that has been a concern here, that the Chinese companies are not a party to this. Amongst the other takeaways, well, there's some impressive numbers that were thrown across. The minister pointed out that over the next few years, the aggregate production that we're likely to see is going to be north of 11 lakh crores, of which about 7 lakh crores will be exported. There will be 3 lakh direct jobs, 9 lakh indirect jobs. So overall, the mood here in the ministry is quite positive, is quite optimistic. And speaking and hearing comments coming in from the likes of Mr. Mohindroo, clearly the industry is optimistic as well going forward. In fact, speaking of Mr. Mohindroo, if I can come across to you, one question that I want to ask to you is that even the most optimistic scenario, the ministry sees value addition increase from 15 to 20% to 35 to 40%, suggesting that there will continue to be an import component of the manufacturing ecosystem here in India. The question I want to ask you is that given the sensibilities that we have seen more recently, the geopolitics that we've seen play out, what does that do to key components such as lithium-ion batteries, which have to be imported for manufacturing here in India? Just your sense on what the China factor does to the scheme going forward, to the manufacturing ecosystem developing here in India.
Ashmit, first of all, I'd like to correct a few things which Sanjay and Chandrasekhar said. Number one is that Chandrasekhar alluded that Apple's value addition in China is $8 or something. This is completely false and wrong. Apple has created about 4 million jobs in China, and the value addition is much more than what he's suggesting. This is an old 10-year-old report somewhere which is floating around on the internet. This is not correct at all. Number two, the number of Indian companies, he seemed to suggest that the number of Indian companies who applied is less than the universe of the companies. That is also not correct. Many of the Indian companies have actually stopped doing business in the last 1 or 2 years and have really shrunk badly. So the number of Indian companies who applied are actually, more than what has been operating in the last year. Let's say, for example, for Optimus, it's a revival, and the others have come in very enthusiastically. Also, Sanjay seems to suggest that as if there is no plan for value addition and it is only assembly. Now, assembly is extremely valuable, and Ashmit, that will answer your question also. I'm asking one question to everybody these days. What is the imports of electronics in China? Not exports. China still imports $400 billion worth of electronics, right? And most of them are strategic electronics like memory and semiconductors and so on. So we have to understand the ecosystem, the global value chain very deeply, rather than just making, macro and motherhood statements like this. These are very well thought out schemes. These numbers are very, very conservative. You know, the most interesting thing is that the numbers which the minister has indicated are very conservative numbers. And you write down the date and the time today, we will end up doing at least 3 times these numbers in terms of revenue, in terms of investment, in terms of jobs. In fact, in the jobs, it will be at least 5 to 7 times of this number. And that is a hallmark of what I'm seeing these days. For example, when the task force was set up in December 2014, we were given the target of 1.5 lakh crores of manufacturing. We have already crossed 2 lakh crores as that period comes to an end. Component target was 50,000 crores. We have crossed 1 lakh crores, right? And you've seen the number of factories which have come up. So this doomsday scenario which we paint for everything is actually not correct, right?
Okay,
and
I take your point. I take your point, Pankaj, but since you were responding to the statements that Mr. Kapoor and Chandrasekhar were raising, I also want your perspective with respect to security concerns. The point that Mr. Chandrasekhar and Kapoor raised was also that just removing Chinese companies from these PLI benefits may not entirely put together the security concerns that could arise. What do you make of that, one? And the point that you raised on Apple, yes, I definitely see that 3 of the companies that have been selected are manufacturers for Apple. Do you believe that Apple is going to have a significant advantage when it comes to global players? And of course, that is favorable to India, correct?
Apple does not have a market in India. It's a very tiny market. It's less than 1% of the global market.
Yeah.
So the fact that they are coming in means it is for export, which is extremely good for India. You see, even if we do 10% value addition and you export a lot, there is a lot of value addition happening in India. 35 to 40% is an excellent number. China, after 30 years of development of the electronic industry, is around that level only. Only in feature phones, they have gone up to 95%, which India is going to hit in the next 1.5 years. Feature phone value addition will be around 90% in 24 months' time. We are not seeing this, we are not understanding this. Similarly, in what Ashmit was asking on lithium-ion cells, now if you look at the base of the core components, lithium-ion cell is one. We are rolling out a massive program for lithium cells. We will have production capacities coming up in the next 1 year to 3 years. A capacity of more than 50 gigawatt is coming in. Second is display open cell. Work on that has started. Okay. Semiconductors, fabs.
So that's interesting. You're pointing out that there is a significant amount of ecosystem that is being built around this PLI scheme, around the manufacturing initiative. Mr. Mohindroo, I'm sorry to interject. We're running out of time here. One final question here, and this I'll put across to Mr. Kapoor. Mr. Kapoor, I'll just make a quick reference to a statement that was made by Mukesh Ambani yesterday, where he said that feature phones and the 2G network is holding back over 300 million Indians from participating truly in the digital revolution. The question that I want to ask you is, as the local manufacturers come on board and as they look to participate in this manufacturing ecosystem, do you think over the next couple of years they can develop a brand that will have that appeal and develop phones that will be, again, cost effective? That's again something key to be kept in mind. Brand loyalty, appeal and cost effectiveness. Do you think we can locally develop it in a way that will successfully compete with global competitors? Mr. Kapoor.
Yeah, first and foremost, I wish to clarify that infrastructure technology always leads the terminals technology, right? Terminals follow. The infrastructure moves are made first, right? The 4G comes first, the devices come later. The 5G comes first, the devices come later. And if 2G is sunset in India, obviously there'll be now complete room to move towards 4G because 3G is a dead technology anyway. As far as brands and opportunities concerned, absolutely the consumer in the market is very savvy. And the winner in this market doesn't come on price, it comes on consumer experience. If we really develop quality products, that will give consumer experience and stickiness. They will stay on for long, and India will have an opportunity not only to be pervasive in the Indian market, but be globally acceptable. But we need to really get there. I mean, at the end of the day, the Chinese players who came into the Indian market did not only succeed because they were selling cheaper, they succeeded because the quality of their products was doing better than the products that were being offered in the Indian market earlier. Right. So I think it's an acceptance. Otherwise, the repeat purchase doesn't happen. The consumer is very, very savvy.
Okay. Mr. Chandrasekhar, final point to you, sir. Do you believe that the 5 names that have come out in the domestic companies, are they or do they already have the brand value in India to be able to expand and create a global standing of their own? And last point to you, sir, the point that Mr. Mohindroo was raising about these numbers actually being conservative, what do you make of that?
Okay, the first is to answer the first question that the brands which are coming up in India, do they have what it takes to go abroad? Certainly, I think the fact that they have been able to hold their own in a fiercely competitive market where you had all kinds of foreign brands, including Chinese brands, competing, does indicate that there is a capability that exists and on the basis of which they can build further. Right now, the footprint outside of India is much smaller, I believe, and therefore one will have to see, how quickly and how well the global expansion takes shape, riding on the size of the Indian market, which they have, in which they have a footprint. The second is, as far as these numbers being conservative, it's difficult to say. Obviously, the minister has put out a set of numbers, and these would be the numbers that companies have committed in their applications. Normally, companies are conservative because they don't want to fall short and incur any kind of penalty. So it is quite likely that the companies, especially with all of which reputed brands, would actually accomplish more. But definitely emphasize that we need to be looking not just at the value of the products, but the value addition, the quantum of the incentive, and the import duties, as well as the degree of coverage of strategically important areas. All of these, I think, need to be looked at. What has, and I want to make it clear that this is not a doomsday prediction. I don't think that that is to describe what has been said as a doomsday prediction by Pankaj is correct. This is just stating the facts as they are. And if there are a set of statistics covering these points, I think it would be good to know, because that is what the whole manufacturing capability in India needs to evolve through, step by step.
All right. Mr. R. Chandrasekhar, Mr. Sanjay Kapoor, Pankaj Mohindroo, thanks for joining in and giving us a detailed analysis of what the minister has said, and of course the companies that have been shortlisted. Ashmit Kumar, thanks for joining in and connecting with us after the press conference. Completely out of time on this special